Okay, so I will now share my screen. Thank you so much for joining us, first of all. And we want to be brief and leave a space for discussion and questions. So I will run very fast the presentation of our annual report, which was again this year edited by a group of people active in EBCO, and many thanks to Derek, Georgios, Angelos, Esa, Semih, Friedrich, Yurii, and Zaira for this. The main finding of the EBCO annual report is that Europe was not a safe place, unfortunately, in previous year that the report covers, 2021, because we saw again conscientious objectors in several countries being prosecuted, arrested, tried by even military courts, imprisoned, having fines, intimidation, attacks, even death threats and discrimination in some countries. Those countries include Turkey. It's the only Council of Europe member states up to now that has not yet recognized the right to conscientious objection. We will have Merve focusing on this in a special presentation. This includes the northern part of Cyprus, of course, Azerbaijan as well. There is still no law on alternative service, and another series of countries, Armenia, Russia, Ukraine, Greece, the Republic of Cyprus, Georgia, Finland, Austria, Switzerland, Estonia, Lithuania, and Belarus, who is a candidate member for the Council of Europe, but we do include it in the reports. In this map, you will see the conscription map in Europe. It's still enforced in 18 Council of Europe member states, and in the dates you can see the ones that they have abolished or suspended the conscription. These are the years that the conscription was abolished or suspended. Unfortunately, we had some countries that they reintroduced conscription even if they had originally abolished it, like Ukraine in 2014, then Lithuania, then Georgia, and finally Sweden in 2018. We give in the report the tables with detail for each country, when they were abolished and by which law, or if it was never existed. Then we have a special section on conscription and contract or professional soldiers. You can see here the countries that they have professional soldiers and the percentage of them in the army. The highest is Switzerland, Finland, and Turkey. We have also a map about the recognition of conscientious objection, where we can see here on which year each country has recognized the right to conscientious objection. We have here again the exception of Turkey that has not still recognized, but also for the other countries, this doesn't mean that it's okay, that it doesn't mean that there is fully recognized or there are no problems. For example, we have big problems even in the constitutional provisions in Bulgaria, Russia, and Belarus, in Azerbaijan, I already mentioned before. And despite legal recognition, the persecution of conscientious objectors often persists, like, for example, in Greece. Here we have a table in the annual report that we give in per year and country, the provision under which this took place. And here with colors, we can see the European map of conscientious objection. So in blue, it's the countries that there have no conscription today. In green, they have a conscription and they do recognize the right to conscientious objection. Again, this doesn't mean that there are no problems, but at least they do recognize there's a human right. And in red, where the recognition of conscientious objector is still not the case. In this table that we have as well in the annual report, we have the duration of the military service and the civilian service in the countries that they do recognize the conscientious objection, the ratio, and if men or women are also applicable. We have a section for the military expenditure. Here you can see this figure for all the world, where you can see the first one is United States, then China, India, UK, and Russia, France, Germany. And then for our area of interest, the Council of Europe, you can see here in green, it's the only countries that they have registered a decline comparing to the previous report. And the red that we have increases in 2020. The biggest of them are in Montenegro, Romania, Azerbaijan, Kosovo, Hungary, Belgium, and Luxembourg. We also take care about the recruitment ages because we have the optional protocol to the Convention on the Rights of the Child on the involvement of children in armed conflict, but unfortunately still today, a disturbing number of European states continue to do this, to recruit persons underage and even to place them in service and in positions that they allow them even for active deployment before they're 18-year-old. So we have also a section in our annual report every year for this, and the table per country and exactly the minimum conscription age and the minimum voluntary enlistment age. So this is another focus area that we push so that we don't have any more this problem with the children. As for the refugees, the conscious objectors who do apply for asylum in other countries usually are not granted international protection. We have a good case this year from Germany that we had Beran from Turkey of Kurdish origin, that he was recognized and took the refugee status. So these are the good news. On the other hand, in the European Court of Human Rights, we still have 3 cases pending against Turkey from the northern part of Cyprus, Halil, Haluk, and Murat, who is also an EBCO board member. The press unit, they published a fact sheet on conscientious objection in 2021, and we had also a guide on Article 9, which is very good. In the Council of Europe Committee of Ministers, the Steering Committee for Human Rights, they will also include conscientious objection to compulsory military service in their future workshop conferences and all these things, which is something very good. And EBCO has been campaigning a lot for this, like Friedhelm, our former president. Unfortunately, in the European Union, although they do criticize Turkey, they don't include this right to the EU annual report on human rights, and there is no mention also in the European Parliament resolution motion. In the United States, we will hear more from Zaira about this. We have a special rapporteur on freedom of religion of belief that published a report on freedom of thought, which includes a conscious objection. And apart from these general things, we have a whole section on country reports. Here you can see some examples of the country reports that we include every year in our annual report. You can see Finland, Russia, and Turkey, for example. We give the conscription, the military civilian service length, the minimum age, and more information, of course, on the website, where Angelos has created this very interesting interactive also conscientious objection map. You click here on every country and you can open, for example, Ukraine, and you can open all this information. For each link, you can find more information and also the official replies of the ministries to our request of information. So all these are accessible online. And to close with, we could not avoid mentioning, of course, the Russian invasion in Ukraine, although it was not in the scope of the 2021, but it's very important to mention that on the first day that this happened, we published a press release, and we did ask for, at the end of the war, with an immediate ceasefire, leaving space for negotiation and diplomacy. We stand in solidarity with the movements of conscientious objectors, both in Russia and in Ukraine. We are very happy to have together with us Yurii and Alexander, who will share more exactly on these focus countries. So I will leave you here. Thank you so much, and we will say more if you want in the discussion.
Thank you, Alexia. And now I will give the floor to Merve. Alexia referred to Turkey multiple times, so we will hear more about Turkey from Merve.
Thank you, Semih. Thank you, everyone, for joining us today. I'm going to talk the current state of conscientious objectors in Turkey. As Alexia mentioned before, Turkey is the only member country in the Council of Europe that has not recognized the conscientious objection right to military service. In Turkey, every man between the ages of 20 and 41 they have to serve compulsory military service. There is no mechanism in Turkey that conscientious objectors can apply, or there is no alternative service also. The conscientious objectors are criminalized as draft evaders and deserters in Turkey, and they are facing with administrative monetary fines, criminal cases, and repetitive judgments. Once a conscientious objector to military service evades the draft or deserts the military, public authorities identify them as evaders or deserters or draft evaders, and this status becomes the part of the information linked to their national identity. So in the identity checkpoints in Turkey, which is very common in here, police or gendarmerie can see that this person called draft evader, or a deserter. And there is two important law about compulsory military service in here. One is the law on conscription, and the other one, the law military criminal law. The law on conscription and the military criminal law constitute the basis of the compulsory nature of military service, evader, draft evader, and deserter statutes, and the ensuing administrative and criminal punitive measures applied to conscientious objectors. Draft evaders and evaders are reported to the Minister of Interior in order to ensure their apprehension to perform their military service obligation. As I mentioned before, these statutes shown by their national identity. So the police or gendarmerie see these statutes, and every general security checks, they are issued an official record and then released. But these records are the legal basis of issuing administrative monetary fines. These fines must be paid within a month, but conscientious objectors who reject to pay this fine, the administrative fine, are faced with a risk, being apprehended repeatedly after every 15 days. So this causes a civil debt for conscientious objectors. The European Court of Human Rights in 2006 described the impact of non-recognition of the right to conscientious objection to military service as civil debt. This is a very common situation for conscientious objectors in Turkey. There is a mechanism that conscientious objectors can use, but this mechanism is not an effective mechanism. Between 2012 and April 2021, at least 45 individual applications have been made by conscientious objectors to the Constitutional Court. In these applications made to the Constitutional Court, decisions for stay of execution are also requested in order to prevent further violations of the applicant's rights. However, the Constitutional Court either does not examine this request at all and does not even provide a response or reject them on the grounds that there is no serious danger to life or security or moral integrity of the applicant. So we can easily say that the Constitutional Court is not an effective mechanism for conscientious objectors in Turkey. I'm going to give some examples about the restrictions on key human rights that conscientious objectors are facing, so you can imagine the general picture of civil debt that conscientious objectors are facing. One restriction is the restriction of freedom of movement. The freedom of movement of conscientious objectors is highly restricted due to a number of possible checks that would lead to their being identified as draft evaders or deserters. This then starts a process that leads to a prosecution. Because of this situation, most of conscientious objectors are avoiding to travel inside Turkey, because when they encounter an identity checkpoint in the streets or in, for example, camping areas or hotels, it means that they will face with an official report, and it means that they will face with an administrative monetary fines. The other restriction is the right violation of the right to education. The compulsory character of the conscription and the lack of legal arrangements for conscientious objection breaches the right to education. Under the law on conscription, the students who have not fulfilled their military service can postpone at a certain age But after this age, they cannot register or enlist to a high school or a university. So some of the conscientious objectors are facing with the violation of right to education. The other restriction is the opportunity to earn one's living. Under the law on conscription again, evaders, draft evaders, and deserters cannot be employed in civil service or private service, and those who employ them will be prosecuted. Because of this law, most of the conscientious objectors getting fired from their job, and most of them forced to work without an insurance. This is very common in Turkey. And the other restriction and violation maybe is the prohibition of torture, inhuman and degrading treatment, and right to respect for private life. I'm going to share a graphic with you so you can imagine the civil death situation that conscientious objectors are facing. This is the graphic of the data that we collect between March 2021 and March 2022. These are the restrictions experienced by the conscientious objectors. You can see that the most common restriction or violation is the violation of right to work. Most of the conscientious objectors, as I mentioned before, cannot get a job with Social Security, and they get fired from their job. And most of them, the second common restriction is the restriction of freedom of travel. So this is a picture that what is the consequences of being a conscientious objector in Turkey. We have some recommendations to bring the legislation and practice. Of course, Turkey must take legislative measures. We also mentioned this point in the EBCO report. You can read details from that report. I am also going to share some of our publications link that you can read detailed the situation in Turkey and our recommendations to the Committee of Ministers and Turkish government. So Turkey must take legislative measures. They must recognize the right to conscientious objection to military service without a delay, to set up an independent and impartial decision-making bodies tasked with determining whether a conscientious objection to military service is genuinely held in a specific case, and to review relevant legislation, including but not limited to the law on conscription, the military criminal law, etc., and to ensure that the applications and persons in a similar position are free from the risk of further prosecution and can fully enjoy their political, civil, economic, social, and cultural rights. This is just a brief summary of what conscientious objectors are facing, what are the restrictions and violations in Turkey. As I said, I'm going to share some links from chat box, a report of our work, and you can get the detailed information from that report. What is the consequences of being a conscientious objector in Turkey? Thank you everyone for listening and joining us.
Thank you very much, Merve. Now we will hear from Zaira about the recommendations in the EBCO report, as well as Zaira will share an update from United Nations.
Thank you, Semih. Thank you to everyone for participating this afternoon with us. And thank you to Alexia and Merve for your presentation. I will follow up on what Alexia has presented to you and briefly on the recommendation that EBCO has published at the end of the report. This report has been shared with several institutions like the European Parliament, the Council of Europe, and other international institutions. This because it is important to inform, to report, and to monitor the right to conscientious objection. Briefly, regarding the recommendation, first of all, the main one, to abolish conscription. This is the starting point. And then the second one is the recognition of the right to conscientious objection. As Alexia has reported, several countries do not recognize the right to conscientious objection. We just heard the presentation from Merve regarding the situation in Turkey. So this is another strong recommendation that we do address to all the states and international organizations. In particular, the right to conscientious objection should apply to all those who refuse to serve in the military service, the serving members, and the reservists. So to anyone. And it should be granted on any ground, not just religious ground or peace ground, but any ground of conscience. And the other point, which is related to this, is that states should provide a non-punitive and non-discriminatory alternative civilian service. What we notice is also that some countries did recognize the right to conscientious objection, but the alternative service which they are offering to objectors is not non-punitive and non-discriminatory. So we do reinforce a recommendation that the alternative service is not punitive or discriminatory. And again, we continue with another recommendation regarding juvenile recruitment. This is a big issue also in Europe. We do have several countries like Germany and UK where we do have underage recruitment, and Alexia has already detailed this issue. And a fourth one, which concern conscientious objection and the objectors, is a recommendation about asylum. We will hear today more about this issue by Rudi from Connection, so I'm not going into details, but it's important to consider that some people fleeing from their countries, they are fleeing because they are forced to serve in the military. They are not recognized their right to refuse and to object. And this is very important for the hosting country to understand the situation in the original countries of these people. This is why we do recommend protection, international protection for those who flee from forced military service. And then there are other two recommendations which are a little bit wider. One is connecting to the war system. As we do advocate for conscientious objection to military service, we do invite and call for a lowering of the military expenditure, which is a support to the war system. And then a last one is concerning the peace education. So it's more about the cultural aspect. We do see in several countries that campaigning for a conscientious objection to military service is also difficult because of the cultural background of the country. And peace education can be one of the channels to start to talk about alternatives to militarism, and also to inform, simply to inform young people that there is a right to object to military service. And we can see this in Europe, and it's very relevant. Wherever we witness a militarization of education and schools, what EBCO does is monitoring and reporting. It does this with the assistance of several international NGOs. One of these is the one I'm representing, IFOR. We do partner with EBCO, especially at the UN, where we have a consultative status. And one work which is very important is to take the floor during the plenary of the Human Rights Council to address the issues of the right to conscientious objection, to report on country situation, individual cases. This is what we do regularly at the UN. And one last thing very important is that since 2012, the Human Rights Council has adopted a resolution asking to the to the High Commissioner of Human Rights to prepare in consultation with member states, relevant UN agency, programs, funds, intergovernmental and NGO, and human rights institution, analytical report on conscientious objection to military service. And this year we have worked together for a new call to contribute to the report of the Office of the High Commissioner, which will be presented this coming session of the Human Rights Council. And EBCO has submitted its report, and the partner organization have also submitted some other reports, because it's very important that we can share the information and we can monitor and advocate. This is another important action that we do at the UN. And we will soon hear from Yurii and also from Alexander, who will present to you very specific national situation. We have been working with both of them, in particular with Yurii at the Human Rights Committee, at the Human Rights Council, at the UPR. This is one work the IFOR does to support EBCO at the European region level, but also internationally, with some human rights defenders and objectors to address the details of the issue. As we said, it's very important to raise awareness and to pay attention. Alexia has just mentioned that some countries in Europe had suspended conscription, and some of them, like Sweden and Ukraine, had reintroduced. So it's very important for all of us to keep the attention to this issue. There are so many other countries like Italy, France, where the conscription has been suspended. And it's important to be able to raise awareness on this. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Zaira. I'm checking the Q&A part for the questions. We have few questions. I will try to keep them as brief as possible. And Gulia, I hope I pronounce your name correct. We would get back to your question in the end. I hope that's fine. Because I also want to make sure that our friends from Russia and Ukraine has enough time to present the cases from their countries. Michael asks, does the Turkish Republic of Northern Cyprus have its own conscription? Yes, and they don't serve with the Turkish forces. They have their own military service and conscription, but I don't know, Alexia, whether you would like to share slightly more about the Turkish, the northern part of Cyprus, the situation there.
Yes, it is no. I will not take more time here. It's I sent the link of the EBCO report
Okay.
in the chat so that everyone can see. We have a specific section, of course, for the northern part of Cyprus. And for the other question, that if it's recorded, yes, we do record this, and we will upload the video of the webinar in all the organizations, websites, and social media. And also, I encourage all the panelists to share their presentations as well. I can share mine, of course. And it's great that we can hear now from Yurii and Alexander, and also Rudi has very important things to say about the right to asylum.
Yeah, thank you, Alexia. And for your other question, Michael, whether Islam recognized conscientious objection or not, none of us are theologians here, so we wouldn't be able to answer that question properly, but there are Muslim conscientious objectors, let me say it that way. So now we can move to the second part of our event, where we will hear from Yurii, Alexander, and Rudi. Yurii, maybe we can start with you.
Okay, dear friends, thank you for coming to our webinar today to discuss peace and conscientious objection to military service. My name is Yurii Sheliazhenko. I am Executive Secretary of Ukrainian Pacifist Movement, and in my presentation I will tell about peace movement in Ukraine, about our advocacy of human right to refuse to kill, and in the end I will share short poetic reflection. So you probably are curious how consistent pacifists in Ukraine are living in time of war. I was here at home from the first day of Russian aggression against Ukraine under the shelling. My home was shaking, and 3 months from February to May, I spent in many conversations, organizational work, peace studies. We had 2 meetings online after Russian invasion. At the background of this slide, you see a cover of our celebration of the International Conscientious Objectors Day. We support and cooperate with local NGOs in Ukraine, continue to cooperate with global civil society in European Bureau for Conscientious Objection, War Resisters International, International Peace Bureau, World Beyond War, Eastern European Network for Citizenship Education. Of course, it is not hard to resist war in the country which asks for the world more and more weapons. Of course, weapons supply are rather escalate conflict and any pro-peace comment in social networks and in real life also cause a lot of offensive, obscene comments. After popular video blogs, I and other members of our movement received threatening calls from the military. We continue to resist war and help to resist war in whole the world. We are cooperating with many peace movements in the West, in Russia, because it is important to help people to understand that people should tell to authorities, to the powerful, that the war should be not waged forever. We make statements, make petitions. For example, we petitioned in interest of pacifists who are not allowed to leave Ukraine, and we support other petitions. Recently, a petition against compulsory military service and against ban for almost all men to live in Ukraine gathered 27,000 of signatures at the petition site of President Zelensky, and now we are waiting for a response of our president. By the way, we support willing of our government to continue peace talks when our government is willing enough, because it depends. Unfortunately, now in Ukraine and in Russia, authorities are rather willing to fight than to talk. And a strong peace movement is needed to tell Putin, to tell Zelensky, stop this bloodshed, start to talk. Human rights defense, defending right to refuse to kill, is very important of direction of our work. And of course, we support by peace work, by other contributions, peace movement and peace building activities. Talking about conscientious objection in Ukraine, on this slide you see a part from EBCO annual report, Conscientious Objection to Military Service in Europe 2021. And there are a lot of information what is going wrong here, because conscientious objectors in Ukraine are discriminated in legal recognition of right to refuse to kill. Conscientious objection is restricted by the law to privilege confessions, and by the way, the law on military mobilization provides no exceptions. Even members of these privileged confessions are worrying, and unfortunately it is a topic of taboo. Peace talks, conscientious objection, it is taboo in Ukrainian society. And war resistors developing peace movement in brotherhood and sisterhood of war resistors in many other lands in the world. We are trying to break this taboo, and we are talking that it is not compliant with international human rights standards, that alternative service in Ukraine is hardly accessible. There is no fair procedure. You should prove genuineness of your beliefs. It is just not right, especially if the only proof which they allow is certificate of membership in one of 10 religious confessions in religious organization. No secular pacifists, no people who are belong to denominations not registered in Ukraine, and so on. Ukraine is not willing to comply with recommendations of United Nations Human Rights Committee to stop human rights violations during conscription and mobilization. And in letter which you can read in this wonderful EBCO annual report, you can see that they admit Ukraine is not complying with international human rights standards, but they are not willing to comply with human rights standards before Ukraine will win in the war. It is just nonsensical position. Also, talking about current policy, we received a letter. We petitioned the State Border Service of Ukraine to allow pacifists to seek asylum abroad. We requested public information about legal foundations, justification of this travel ban, and no adequate answer was provided. Frankly, no answer at all firstly were provided, and not only to us. Tens of people asked the State Border Service to provide explanations about legal procedure of crossing the border of Ukraine. They didn't respond, so we complained to our ombudsman, parliamentarian commissioner on human rights, and parliamentarian commission on human rights started a procedure, formal procedure, and the State Border Service of Ukraine published some explanations about cases when people can, for example, go to university abroad or helping disabled people to live abroad, and so on. Some exceptional cases when they allow people intended to be military mobilized to go abroad, and no exceptions for pacifists. Also, of course, a great problem is illegal conscription by de facto authorities in Russian occupied Crimea and in Donbass with this self-proclaimed People's Republic. They have no provisions to conscientious objectors. We are in contact with some people who are hiding homes to avoid military mobilization. What is happening here, it is worse than in Ukraine, of course. Our directions of work. We should uphold the human right to refuse to kill, and it is our first priority today. We are giving legal advice, and we are seeking for lawyers able to help conscientious objectors. It not going smoothly, but we have some ideas how to institutionalize this work and engage necessary resources to it, because conscientious objection to military service should be fully protected, and it is a cornerstone of nonviolent way of life. Our very important direction of work is indeed working on stopping the war, to advocate immediate ceasefire, comprehensive good faith peace talks, and worldwide transition transition towards nonviolent society. And of course, refusing to kill, we take responsibility to continue peaceful life and to care that people who were forced to engage in war or became victims of war, of Russian aggression, of Ukrainian militarism. We help people who are not willing to be engaged in war, to survive, to remain civilians. We are telling the truth, nevertheless, of this taboo. We give hope. We help the needy in cooperation with other NGOs. We study and teach nonviolence, and strengthening solidarity of peace-loving people and peace movement is indeed one of the main directions of our work. In the end, I would like to finish my presentation with a short poem written yesterday when I was returning from one of peace-building meetings. Unhappy land where songs of birds in spring are interrupted by the roar of flying death. Poor heart, stay calm and chirp with love and truth. Your tears and prayers make new life to blossom.
Thank you very much, Yurii, and lots of solidarity again. So now we can move to Alexander, who is a conscientious objector from Russia, and Alexander will tell us about opposing war in Russia today. Alexander.
I think the floor is mine. I think you can hear me, and I think I will now share with you my screen, and my laptop will manage with that. Super. Now all the participants see my screen. Okay. So I am Alexander Belik. I am coordinator of the Movement of Conscientious Objectors of Russia. And today I will tell you about opposing war in Russia. From the beginning of the war on February 24, we as a movement put our own statement on the war in our social media and our site and everywhere. So that what is happening in Ukraine is a war unleashed by Russia and so on. This was our first step from the beginning of the war. Now we are trying to help all the draftees not to come to the military service. And but before telling about our own activity, I will tell you a little bit about the whole situation in Russia, how it works now, and firstly, I will tell you about Russians who are refusing to fight in Ukraine. We are trying to collect all of these cases in a Google document and regularly update it. It is published by me, but of course, it's not done by only me, but by a lot of other anti-war activists in Russia. You can. Oh, I didn't say anything about my presentation, and that you can find it online, and you can go through all the links which I am showing to you. So now I should share with you in the chat this link up, and you can do everything there. So Russians refuse to fight in Ukraine. This is the Google document. It's available in Russian and in English, and we are trying to collect there all the cases of the Russians who are refusing to fight Ukraine. Then I will say to you about the protests in Russia from the beginning of the war. According to the over the info statistics data, it's now more than 50,000 of people who are detained detained because of their anti-war actions. And I will tell you a little bit about how it looks, how these anti-war actions looks like. It's for example, our volunteer who did this beautiful action maybe 2 weeks ago in St. Petersburg. And then I will refer to 2 of the criminal cases which are now pending in courts and which you can help by signing the petitions on the change.org. First is the case of Sheliazhenko, who is the artist, musician from St. Petersburg, and both of these people are like close friends, not for our movement of conscientious objectors. That's why we are telling about them. But the case of Sheliazhenko is really famous now abroad also, because she put it this price tags. She removed price tags in the supermarket and places there the fragments of paper with anti-war phrases. And for this action, she is now imprisoned and could be imprisoned for 10 years. According to our new law about fake news, you can sign the petition to let her go firstly out from the pre-detention center where she is now, and she is not able to live there because of all the problems with her health, and we are trying to people are trying to help her get out of there. The next one is Boris Romanov, who is to the activists from the St. Petersburg, and he is detained because of the phrases which he tell on the meeting of the municipal council about war in Ukraine and so on. And he is too imprisoned now, and you can also sign his petition here. Let's move on to the movement of conscientious objectors, to our organization. You can find my presentation on our site, but also you can go to the main page, stoparmy.org, and find there some info in English, which is available. But most of them are available in Russia. We are the organization which is founded in 2014. We are helping draftees not to go to the army. We are trying to not to consult a lot of people, but trying to gather the information and put it available online in our catalog of the documents. And in catalog, we are trying to collect all the instructions about all the cases which you can face in the military offices, and also we are trying to collect there some videos on YouTube and like instructions in like pictures and so on. Yes, what we are doing, how we can not to go to the army, how you can not to go to the army today in Russia. So the first one, which we are explaining to people, that the army is not a prison and military duty is not an imprisonment. So you haven't the obligation to go to the army if you don't want to do that. If you don't want to do that, you can apply for alternative civil service. You can apply for medical examination, which I will tell a little bit later. But firstly, you should understand that you shouldn't go to military, and you can use all the unlawful things which the military commissariats normally do with people to protect you. You should fight with all these unlawful things, because military commissariats in Russia cannot organize draft according to the law. They normally, in every situation, they are somehow broken the law about the draft. So you should oppose on every situation when they broken the law, and then you will be free, because they are not interested, not really interested in the people who are trying to fight. For example, I was in the military commissariat in the March. There was a really big queue to the all of the cabinets there. A lot of people were waiting with the like with a sadness on their faces, and we with my colleague with whom we came there, tried to explain them that you shouldn't wait here. Today is not the draft period. You should come only when they call you to the draft period. You shouldn't be here. You just can leave. You shouldn't be there. But they're really afraid of the army, afraid of the things which military commissariats are telling them. That's why we are trying to help people not to afraid and just say no, because it's possible in Russia to say no to military even now. The second, which we are trying to explain, is alternative civil service. We are trying not to like promote alternative civil service, because we understand that it is discrimination. It is discriminative like situation. You should serve 2 years instead of 1 year in the military service. You should serve 2 years in alternative civil service. The places where people are working are really awful. The like money which they are receiving there is also really low. That's why we are using alternative civil service more to like protect people. We are applying for alternative civil service to stop the draft for the person, and then maybe to object on the medical reasons, or just object on the first reason, like trying to say no to every unlawful acts which they are doing with you. The third one also is the medical reasons on which you can object from military service. There is a really big list of medical reasons on which you can apply for exclusion from the draft. We are trying to explain people how to collect all the documents correctly for the medical examination, because normally people are not in Russia collecting documents about their medical situation, and we are trying to help them to collect all the things properly according to the law, to have this right to go out of drafts according to medical reasons. We're also trying to fight militarization of youth. You know about all these things which I'm showing to you on the screen, which are happening in Russia, but also we have got the pre-military service in Russia according to the law. It happens not now and not according to the war in Ukraine. It was every time it was. All the people in the age of 16, they should go to their pre-military camps, and we are trying to oppose that, and trying to we are making instructions to people how to these young draftees how not to go to this pre-military service, and they are applying for the heads of the school that they are objecting, they don't want to go to the pre-military service, that they are anti-war and pacifist and so on, and we are trying to help people to do so in Russia. This is our conscientious objectors, but it's a really old part of the presentation. These pictures, these people are now maybe 4 years more old than they are here. And also the last one, we are working with the queer draftees. We are working with homosexual and transgender people who don't want to go to the army. For example, now you can see here the pictures which we prepared with the charitable foundation Sphere, the largest foundation supporting LGBT rights in Russia. after starting the war in Ukraine, because a lot of people from the LGBT community wants to know how to not to go to the army. And we are trying to help LGBT community, because in Russia it always was LGBT community was always close to anti-war, because, for example, in the biggest Russian organization, Russian LGBT network, in the charter of it, it's written that they are opposing war. Yes, they are like not really pacifist, but like they are against the war. And here is how to support us. Yes, here is our crypto links and the link of our partner organization in Finland, who are helping us to to survive now. And at the end, there is my links to my social media. You can not hesitate. You shouldn't hesitate to contact me via Facebook, Instagram, or Telegram. Or just follow me there and see how it works. So thank you very much for your listening. I'm ready to answer your questions. Semih, the floor is yours, I think. And now I should stop somehow.
Thank you, Alexander.
Stop this one. Oh, it's
Thank
stopped.
you. Thank you, Alexander, for this inspiring and very informative presentation. Now, there are questions for you, but we will address them after Rudi's. After we hear Rudi. Rudi from Connection EV will tell us about the asylum rights of deserters and conscientious objectors from Russia, Belarus, and Ukraine. So, Rudi, the floor is yours. You're muted, Rudi. You're still muted.
Oh, okay.
Okay, now works. Yeah.
Now you can hear me, I hope. So, yes. Thanks a lot, Yurii and Alex, for the impressive statements. It's really good to hear that you can do so many things regarding this real cruel war. Thanks a lot. I'm the director of Connection EV, a German-based organization working to conscientious objection and desertion on international level since 30 years. And our focus is, one of our focus is to support conscientious objectors and deserters in war regions and to try to help asylum seekers who are coming to Germany, who are coming to Europe and asking for a refugee status because they are conscientious objectors and deserters. The problem is, in general, the prosecution of conscientious objection and desertion is not accepted as a reason to get a refugee status. And that is a main problem for it. And as we can see in the war in Ukraine, we have thousands in the moment who left the different countries. So we have numbers from Belarus, about 20,000. We know that thousands from Ukraine left to Moldavia or to other countries, Western European countries. We know from, I heard from Russia a number of 300,000 oppositions and other Russians who left the country. Of course, not all of them are conscientious objectors and deserters or draft evaders, but I'm quite sure that there are really thousands of it who left the country because of the war. Yeah, for today, I would like to share with you some ideas about the question, what does it mean to ask for asylum? And where are chances to get it, or there are no chances to get it? So a bit about the legal situation. I have some problems to tell it in detail, because we have very different levels of it. So we have 3 different countries involved, mainly Russia, Belarus, and Ukraine. And of course, we have some other countries involved in the war, like the NATO states, but the main countries involved in the war are the 3. And if we only look for the 3 countries, we have 3 different situations for draft evaders and deserters if they ask for asylum, if they go abroad. Then we have mainly 2 different backgrounds of resistors. Some were deserting, so that means they left the army without leave, and they have to face a harsh prosecution. Others were just hiding or evading the draft, so they left before they were recruited. They prevented to be recruited. I would say it's more clever to do this as to go to the army first. And these 2 groups are totally different in the question for asking for asylum and to get a refugee support and refugee shelter. Then we have resistors staying in really different countries right now. So Russian refusers are mostly in Kazakhstan, Armenia, Georgia, Turkey, Serbia, and some other countries. Belarus refusers are mostly in Georgia and Lithuania. Ukrainian resistors are in Moldavia or Western European countries. So it's really different where they are. And it makes a difference, a big difference, how long they can stay there, what status they have, and some other things. And then we have the situation that Russian and Belarus resistors are very often part of the opposition circles.
Rudi, sorry for interrupting. Just checking something. Are you changing the slides? If that's the case, we are not seeing different slides.
No, I come to the legal point later on. It's
okay, all right. I thought maybe your screen got moved. Okay, thank you.
So we have the situation that a lot of the resistors are part of the opposition circle, so it's mixed. In terms of the asylum questions, that means they would have 2 reasons to ask for asylum: to be part of the opposition, what makes it easier to get asylum, and the part of conscientious objection or draft evading or desertion. And then we have the situation that only some of the countries where they are staying have an asylum proceeding. Some countries are offering a legal stay for a limited time, sometimes very short, sometimes longer. So I got, for example, requests from Turkey some days ago. Some Russian objectors are there, and the passports are not valid anymore. The visa is not valid anymore, and they face really big problems to stay in Turkey anymore. The same is for Belarusian resistors. For resistors from Ukraine, we have to say in the Western European countries that they get a legal humanitarian status for a limited time, up to 3 years. So all Ukrainian citizens who are coming to and fleeing to Western European countries, they get this status. Also resistors from Ukraine. And how to get a refugee status? Now I come to the legal questions, or at least the limited status. For Russian resistors and Belarusian resistors, we were thinking about a reference to refuse to fight in an illegal war. And now I'm changing the slide. It's a reference to the qualification directive of the European Union. That means who is prosecuted because he refused to fight in an illegal war should get a refugee status. Unfortunately, the judgments of the European Court of Justice, that is a court for the European Union, there are judgments which make it very close, very restrictive. That means, for example, it is more or less necessary to ask for conscientious objection first, and or to show that there is no way to ask for it. And this makes it very difficult, especially for draft evaders, because they are not drafted. They didn't ask for conscientious objection. And the next very big point is there must be a link between here the conscientious objection, excuse me, the conscientious objection has to be declared. It should be a political statement or such kind of thing. So it should be linked, the personal statement and the situation should be linked. And this is possible, of course. And then we have the problem that resistors have to prove that a deployment into the war is likely. And this is, I think, for the most of the draft evaders not possible, because they don't know in which unit they would have been and if the unit is in Ukraine or not, or will be in the Ukraine in the future. So if they can't show it, then they won't get a refugee status under this norm. So these are the main problems we saw. And then we were a bit surprised about decision of the German government. Yeah, it's a good step. At first, they said, and here you have the wording, in the case of credibly made desertion of a Russian asylum seeker, it is currently generally assumed that there is a threat of persecution in the case of return to the Russian Federation. And adding to it, it said, since even the term war, referring to the attack on Ukraine, can be punished in the Russian Federation as an oppositional political representation, desertion as an active expression against waging war can be considered an expression of oppositional conviction. So that means the German government says desertion will be prosecuted in a political way. And that offers really a refugee status. The problem here is it is not a solution for draft evaders, and the German government already said it's not for draft evaders. And the other problem is we don't have such a statement on the level of the European Union. So I heard about that Lithuania is looking for a status for Belarusian draft evaders. So some countries are moving, but we don't have solution for them, a general solution. And then the question for Ukraine. For Ukraine, it's different because in international, to see it from the international law, the fight of the Ukrainian army is legal. And so that means that Ukrainian refusers can mostly only refer to the question of conscientious objection. And conscientious objection is unfortunately not seen as a reason to get asylum. On the other hand, the situation for Ukrainian conscientious objectors, as Yurii already told, is very difficult. They are the right is not really guaranteed in Ukraine. So this will be very different, and it will be because they have a humanitarian status at the moment, and besides Moldavia, and that means we will have the question in 2 or 3 years. Yurii, maybe you can add this later. You told me that there are a lot of files already opened against evaders and deserters. So there is a really threat to be prosecuted if they have to return. So to face with all of this, we have the proposal, and we were working on it since the beginning of the war to create a network. Of initiatives and groups from different countries where refusers, resistors, and objectors are staying. There are groups already, as we heard from Ukraine, Russia, from Belarus, there is another one. We have a group in Georgia working from Act for Transformation. And some days, I told you, I got contact to some resistors in Turkey, and I hope we could support this group as well. Other countries are still open, for example, Serbia. And maybe I could tell you more what we try to initiate a bit later. Here, that's very short, the legal situation of draft evaders and conscientious objectors and deserters regarding the question of asylum. Thanks a lot.
Thank you very much, Rudi. So we can go back to the questions. Rachel has a question to both Alexia and Yurii. Maybe Alex, you can start. You can be the first one to answer. How are LGBTI people treated in the draft process in Russia and Ukraine? Excluded, given CO status, medically excluded, or what?
So if the talk is about the gay people, normally they can be drafted in Russia, but according to the Russian homophobia, according to the homophobia of the Russian military service, military commissariat, you can use your homosexuality to evade from draft. You can just say that you are gay in the military commissariat, and then they will send you to the hospital for the medical examination. And according to the International Health Organization, this is the 10 version of this, how to say it, МКБ 10 Юрий, пожалуйста, помогите мне. Международный классификатор болезней.
International Classification of Diseases.
Yes, International Classification of Diseases, the 10 version of it, says that the personality disorder can be homosexually typed, and that's why in Russia they are sending people to hospitals to medical examination, then examine them there, and then you are free, but you should spend from nothing to 2 weeks in the hospital. That's not okay for a lot of people. And talking about the transgender people, it's a really big issue to evade draft for them, because they have got a lot of problems just to come to the military commissariat because of their fearance of the military and so on. And they can object from the military service, but we are trying now to, before the war, we tried to protect transgender rights. We tried to help them object it not according to the psychiatrist, but according to hormones which they should take. And the army cannot provide them with the hormones. That's why we are saying that they can object. And they, according to the law, they both rights are in the for the transgender people, and we're trying to use not the psychiatrist right, but the hormonal rights. And it's hard because normally psychiatrists saying like, oh, you are strange, so you should go to the hospital, and transgenders are not willing to go to the hospitals in Russia, and that's why we are trying to protect them and help with this hormonal null exemption for the medical reasons. And talking about the intersex people, we are just trying to start our work with that. We tried to start it before the war, and now just all of these things stopped. But we are trying to do our best to help LGBT people too, and not to exclude them from our perspective. Thank you.
Thank you, Alex. Yurii, would you like?
Talking about Ukraine, it is known fact during interactive dialogue with United Nations Human Rights Commissioner, one of international coalitions raised the question about difficulties for transgender concerning crossing the border and lack of legal procedure of recognition of change of gender. Also, we know some LGBTQ persons in Ukraine. For example, I had a conversation with one man who went to military commissariat and tried to declare conscientious objection, tried first of all to understand perspectives. Can he be conscripted, and if it would be a compulsory military service, of course he have fears of treatment from hostile treatment in army, in our culture generally hostile to gay people, LGBTQ and so on. And there was a scandal because they refused to adopt, to receive this statement of his, and he complied to National Human Rights Institution, and they replied to him that being gay is not a ground for exemption from military service, and he was very upset and nervous. I tried to calm him, and later he told that he had hospitalization, and he managed to obtain a certificate of mental illness, but they still refuse to receive his application for exemption, you know. And Rudi mentioned about criminal prosecution of people for refusing to serve in the military. Indeed, we have such statistics. After the start of Russian invasion, 397 criminal cases was opened against people who are refused to serve in the military. It is Article 336 of Criminal Code of Ukraine, evasion from conscription during mobilization in a special period, military service by conscription of reservists in special period. And such crime is punishable by imprisonment for a term of 3 to 5 years. And to be charged, you just may refuse from military service when received a summons when you are called to draft station. Unfortunately, court sittings, the trials are not are less public now than before the Russian invasion, because the state register of judgments was closed, and schedule of court trials was also closed. It is hard to follow court practice, and also there are a lot of cases of desertion. If in January, April 2021, there were only 43 cases of desertion, in January, April 2022, it is 851 cases of invasion, of desertion, according to Office of Prosecutor General of Ukraine, and also a number of crimes of illegal trafficking of persons across the state border of Ukraine was increased more than twice, because of many people are trying to flee abroad from this imposition of total military mobilization. So indeed, we have many human rights challenges today, and we should respond.
Thank you. Thank you, Yurii. As you just mentioned, gave us some data on this number of deserters. There is one question from Dario, who asks, where can I find data on deserters and objectors in the current conflict in Ukraine? And he thanks for the presentations. I'm not quite sure we have one source where we can reach all this sort of a data, but any of you would like to comment on that?
I will put it into chat. The file is in, you can see this page in Ukrainian, but automatically translate, and the file is Excel file in Ukrainian, but you can use automatic translation in, for example, in Google Documents.
Okay. Thank you. Dean Peacock has a question. Dean says, I'm interested to learn more about how conscientious objection organizations in Russia and Ukraine work with women's peace organizations and other feminist movements. Could you say a little bit about that? Alex, would you like to comment on that question?
Yes, of course. We we have got some feminists in our organization inside. But also we just communicate with other. For example, this is feminist anti-war resistance. I think I should translate it like that. It is the biggest Telegram channel for the feminists who are against the war in Ukraine and so on. Yes, we are pro-feminist organization. We are trying to communicate with all other feminist organizations in Russia. So it's just we're trying to be friends. Yes.
Yurii, would you have any comments in the Ukrainian context?
I missed the question. As I understand, it is about participation of women in peace movement, right? Or no?
It's more about your connections with the feminist movements in Ukraine as the Ukrainian pacifist movement.
Yes, we know Ukrainian section of Women's League for Peace and Justice. Their leader is Nina Potarska, and they are indeed contributing in peace movement in Ukraine and abroad, and we are also are always ready to cooperate and support and so on. And also there was we have women in Ukrainian pacifist movement, so I think that gender equality and feminism is important topics of transition to non-violent society of the future.
Thank you, Yurii. Thank you. Alex, would you like to add something? I can see.
Yes, I want to add that we also work with the Soldiers Mothers of St. Petersburg. Also, of course, I was here in chat, personal message from me, from Alexia, so that I don't say anything about that. Yes, of course, we work with them, but now it's the time when the new Soldiers Mothers should appear because of all the situation which is happening now. Maybe you saw the video of interviewing of mothers whose sons are involved to the war in Ukraine from Russia's side, and they are now like in really big, like trying to gather everyone and to fight with the military commanders to get their sons back or the bodies or anything from their sons back to homes. And this is the time when I think some new organizations will appear, because it was the same like Soldiers Mothers of St. Petersburg appears in the times of the Chechen wars, and that is now exactly the same situation with the Chechen wars in Russian society. So now that is the time for cooperation of these new mothers. We don't know what organizations they will bring us, but we will see.
Thank you, Alex. I will have one question to Rudi. Rudi, I know that you have an ongoing campaign called Get Out. Correct me if I'm mispronouncing its name. Would you like to tell us about that? It's about supporting conscientious objectors and deserters from Belarus, Ukraine, and Russia.
Yeah, yes, thanks. Yeah, in the beginning of the war, we were thinking about what to do, and the first step what we did is to open a counseling service in Russian language to open the possibility for Russians, Belarusians, and Ukraine to call a number and to get information, not especially to the situation in these countries, but to the question of asylum. What does it mean to stay in Germany or to stay in Europe? This was one step, and the counseling service is still running. Then we were preparing very short information, also collecting information which are prepared by organizations like the Movement of Conscientious Objection in Russia. Alex told about it, to publish it here in German, English, and Russian, and to the asylum seeking process. Then we were looking for the background information to the question of asylum and conscientious objection, and we found out what I already told, and that was the reason we went to the German parliament to make an appeal. The result I told you, so the German government said for deserters from Russia, it's okay, but it's not enough. Of course, it's not enough. And in the moment, some of you are involved, we look for such kind of an appeal for the European Parliament as well for the Parliamentarian Assembly of the Council of Europe. So to make lobby work for people who left the countries and are looking for refugee status abroad. And what we did as well is a fundraising campaign, and we use this money to support the projects, the groups who are working on this issue. to the movement, to the project from Alexander to Yurii to Georgia, maybe to Turkey, so that this work really can be done. And my wish is to have an exchange, to have a kind of European network to it, because it's changing from day to day. The rules are changing. The countries have this rule or this rule, and it's not really known. And it is very important to collect this information, to make it public, to give possibilities for deserters, objectors to decide what they can do. And I think this is the most important thing, that they really can decide what they, what options they have, and then to support objectors and deserters in some countries who are really in a precarious situation. If the visa is running out, if the passport is running out, to look what we can do on political level and on the level of collaboration between different groups and institutions. So we try to combine all of this and to make as much as possible public that we are doing it, and we hope that we could we could make a start of a European network to support the refusers and resistors.
Thank you very much, Rudi. Maybe you can share some of the links from your website where people can read more about it, and also
Yes.
some people might like to donate, support this work as well.
Sure, good idea.
Yeah. And one other question I will have to Alex. Alex, we can see increasing repression against peace activists in Russia, peace campaigners. And do you expect and feel concerned about increasing repression on your organization, or like, how do you have any strategy on this? How do you manage safety and security?
We have this strategy on this situation. We know about the criminal code of Russian Federation. We can, I hope we can manage that. I think this is the end of my answer. Thank you.
Okay, all right. All right. So we are here for solidarity. And I think we can conclude here. I can see all our panelists have been started feeling tired. Thank you very much, Alexander, Alexia, Yurii, Zaira, Merve, and Rudi for your presentations. And thank you everyone who joined us today, contributed with your questions and comments. This session has been recorded and will be available on our YouTube channel. So you will be able to watch it after this event as well. So yes, thank you very much.
Thank you all.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.